Well, guys, as we wrap up our week, I want to go ahead and start. We left off with the two different stages of becoming a knight. We talked about the page, usually for a young boy between the ages of 7 and 14. The second one was going to be a squire, typically between the ages of 14 and 21. As we're going to see, there are times where they can become a knight even before 21, but typically that was the cutoff. That was the age where most people felt like they were ready to now step into becoming a knight. As we think about 21, obviously, that's what many have kind of deemed to become adulthood. Obviously, there are a few things that begin at 18, but 21 typically going to be adulthood, which is going to carry over even within this becoming a knight. Typically, before the knighting ceremony, where they would now enter into the ranks, a young man was going to spend a night in a chapel where he would pray to the Lord for guidance, for protection, for wisdom, all the things that were going to be needed in the stage ahead. Then the next morning, they would become a knight. While taking communion, the process would be completed with a knighting ceremony, and then they would be officially deemed a knight. Like I said, there were a few instances where there would be a young man that before the age of 21, typically it wasn't going to be like right after becoming a squire, 14, 15, 16 years old, but closer to 21, if there was going to be especially a uniquely distinct moment where a young man would display bravery, a fellow knight might decide at that point that he deserved to now skip over the rest of his squire stage and become a knight at that point. Once they became a knight, there would be moments for practice. Obviously, you have to be ready for moments on the battlefield, and so they would now participate in what were called tournaments. Within that, there would be fighting, sometimes with live weapons. By live, I mean real swords, sometimes with wooden swords, just kind of moving on or working on doing footwork and feinting, where they would fake going a direction and then attack at another. Another thing that they would do is what you see on the bottom there, and that's going to be jousting, trying to knock the other opponent off of his horse. There was a show some years ago on History Channel called Full Metal Jousting. It was interesting seeing people in 21st century America relishing and going back to that, participating in jousting. It was kind of a humorous show. But anyhow, thinking about trying to knock that other opponent off of their horse. Now, if you were a daughter, it wasn't that you would necessarily go through formal education or go to a different castle, but they're going to receive training as well. Typically, they were going to be trained in what they would have to do down the road as they became a wife. They're going to learn how to manage servants. So, again, assigning tasks, making sure those servants are following through, making sure that things are running like they're supposed to, especially if their husband would be away. There was also an opportunity for them to perhaps learn some of the finer parts of medicine. Now, I think that many of you guys perhaps left off not fully into or understanding the ins and outs of Romeo and Juliet. For some of you, I think that you haven't even read it this year, which is sad to me. But anyhow, as you look at this, one of the characters in that story was going to be the apothecary. And that, of course, is a guy who is going to learn how to mix and create medicine. Some of them, again, women, would learn how to do that art. Others of them would perform light surgery. I don't know about you guys. I'm really grateful my mom's a nurse, and so I would trust her to give me a shot. She's done it before. Again, whether that be sewing me up or taking stitches out, I would trust her with pretty much anything with my medical care. But for some of you, I don't know if you would necessarily trust mom as much as they loved you. They carried you for 9 months, maybe as a doctor or a surgeon, medicine person, maybe not your ideal pick. And either way, you're going to see these women now being trained in that. Even though she's going to be under her parents and then obviously her husband, women would get or we're going to have some moments of autonomy and independence. If the husband's away and he's fighting, basically she becomes the leader, the head of that home. while he's away, she is going to be the main one who is going to be in charge. And so those moments of autonomy were relished. They were appreciated by women. It wasn't that they were always going to be second fiddle. They would have moments there of leadership. And so even that training from their mothers was going to be really important. As we look to, this is going to be a time where, as knights are becoming more and more common, that there was going to be a code that was going to be leading Europe. How men should behave, how they should conduct themselves, how they should interact with both foe, enemies, or others. And that, of course, is going to be called the Code of Chivalry. There's going to be it's about behavior, it's about love, it's about so many different aspects of life. We certainly won't get into all of them or many of them here, but just want you to know that there's a lot of facets to that code. There's going to be a lot of different parts that are going to be connected. Some of them are just moralistic, some of them are actually Christian virtues, but we're going to see within that bravery and courage and loyalty, things that hopefully you would want to see emulated or taken on in people that you choose to be friends with. Or perhaps again, we'll date some time down the road. As you look at these things, these virtues, hopefully these are people that you're surrounding yourself with. If not, maybe it's a good opportunity to step back and be able to reevaluate some of those interactions. These things should be true of people that we're connected with, people that are brave. And obviously, we're not going to be brave 100% of the time, but people that are loyal, that's a huge thing. And obviously, if we're struggling, people that are courageous, maybe even for us in our moments that are lower, people that are willing to stand in the gap. These things are going to be really important, and they're going to be seen in the code of chivalry. Men, especially, are expected to live by this code. Knights, obviously, at the top of that, but just even in everyday life, this is going to be something that men are held to, that are expected to live out. And I think that that's something that at times is lacking or missing in our culture today. It seems like, yeah, we hold each other to very low bars. And hopefully, both for myself, but even for you guys, you want to continue to raise the bar and say, I want to be somebody of virtue. I want to be somebody that other people can look at and say, I want to be like them. So these different characteristics going to now be seen. If perhaps, and this is where we'll finish for the week, a knight is going to be seen to be lacking in these things, there's going to be some different punishments that can be carried out within the public arena. A few things that are going to be commonly understood to be the consequences if you do not live out the code of chivalry. First of all, typically the shield would be held or displayed outside of one's home. Like we talked about, this idea of heraldry, this represented who was going to be living in that home. But if you did not follow through on the code of chivalry, they would flip your shield upside down. It was basically a dishonor, saying now this person has done something or behaved in a way that was not going to be honorable, wasn't going to be in line with the code of chivalry. You could also have your armor taken from you, and this was going to be a very valuable thing, something that was going to obviously protect you in battle. If your armor was taken away, it was hard to then continue to go into battle. Likewise, some of them would have their weapons broken, swords that would be melted down basically and then snapped. This was going to be one of your most valuable possessions, and when that happened, it was going to communicate to other people something is awry, something is not as it ought to be, something happened such that this person is now experiencing this dishonor. But probably the most extreme thing that could happen, especially if all of these steps had been taken and a knight continued to, or an individual continued to be somebody that continually broke the code of chivalry or went against it, they would be declared dead to honor. They would be placed in a coffin, and again, keep in mind, they are not actually dead. Some students have thought that they would be like buried eventually. That's not the case, but they would be put into a coffin and carried through the streets. They would then be taken to a church where up in the front, they would be put up on a ledge, and people would come, and there a priest would declare them to be dead to honor. You imagine laying in that box. That had to be such an eerie feeling. Once again, they're not putting them into the ground, so it's not like they're burying them. But just thinking about people being at your funeral is a really bizarre concept. And so for these individuals, that was the last, if you want to put it this way, nail in the coffin. If you were to be declared dead to honor, that would be the end of the line when it came to your standing in society. This was going to be the last thing to go. Well, I hope you guys have had a good week. Again, if I would, it can encourage you to be working on that shield over the weekend. That'll be something that we'll be talking a little bit more on Monday. Otherwise, I hope that you have a great weekend, get some rest, and we'll see one another again on Monday. Take care.